So for the case of Mali, well, there's quite a bit of history behind this. The Federation was grounded, in the White Australia policy, which came out of the eugenics movement, which was that Nazi science of racial purity, and there was a really strong drive historically in Australia to eradicate Indigenous people. And those policies were through assimilation and this idea of breeding out the black. So this doesn't necessarily exist in policy anymore and in law, but it still exists by custom, and people are sort of unconsciously attuned to police this policy. Hence the questions with most Aboriginal people, they're always questioned, what percentage Aboriginal are you? Unless you come from a remote community in the Northern Territory and are very, very dark, people will ask you, what percentage Aboriginal are you? Are you half Aboriginal? Why do you only identify with that half? There's this constant barrage of questions that are designed unconsciously, to extinguish your identity, extinguish your claim to place. So we feel this, whether it's intended as this or not. Of course, mostly it isn't. It's quite innocent, but we feel this as an attack on our identity. And we feel the weight of that history of extermination on us every time we hear that. The Stolen Generations was a policy that was based on this idea of breeding out the native, so they take fairer-skinned children away. So up until very recently, if you're an Aboriginal person with reasonably fair skin, if you had children who had fairer skin than you, a trip to the hospital had a really high likelihood, or to any medical institution, had a really high likelihood of resulting in your children being taken away from you and taken out to be assimilated in institutions. So there is that deeply ingrained fear from not very long ago, within the lifetimes of many of us, and or of the generation before, within our living memory of this being a direct assault on our existence and on our lives. So we still feel it very acutely. So when somebody even innocently questions our identity, it produces a flight or fight response in many of us. And it could result in us discharging ourselves early, or shutting down, or exhibiting defensive behaviours, etc.
So the definition of cultural safety, which comes from Maori nurses actually originally, is to provide a health service that doesn't deny or challenge the person's identity. So as soon as you say to an Aboriginal person, you don't look Aboriginal, what part Aboriginal are you, is your grandmother Aboriginal, you're reducing that person's identity. And so they're not going to trust you. They're not going to tell you what's really wrong with them. You've immediately set up a position where that person doesn't trust you. So it's really important that if somebody says they're Indigenous, you just accept it. And the other thing I think that health professionals don't realise is that when they're doing that, or even anybody doing that, they're buying into cultural genocide. So the whole history of colonisation of Australia was to assimilate Aboriginal people, for us to deny our Aboriginality and to fit in. And as soon as you say to somebody, are you part Aboriginal, or you don't look Aboriginal, you are buying into that cultural genocide unconsciously. And a lot of Australians do that, and they get very confused about why Aboriginal people are so offended when they're asked that question. And that's the reason why.